Hey guys. Well, I'm back. I promised I was going to make a part 2 to my previous video, which ran kind of long. It was on Arthurian romances. And in that video, I talked about the architect of the Arthurian romance. Not that he invented the King Arthur legend to begin with about King Arthur and the sword in the stone and his wife Guinevere. Not so much that, but he created the format of the knight errant who goes on a quest, enters an enchanted land, maybe kills some other knights, or maybe defeats a monster, and goes on an adventure. But anyway, so I held up some books which I included in the description in the previous video on Arthurian legends. Chrétien de Troyes, I think that's how you pronounce it. The French poet, the great architect of the Arthurian romance. I held up three. He wrote 5 Arthurian romances, all in poetry form, and I held up examples of 3 of them. I read all 5 of them, but I held up 3, and I included those 3. They were translated into English verse by Ruth Harwood Klein, uh, and they're excellent translations, especially if you want a translation in verse rather than in prose. However, if you're not picky about verse versus prose, and you don't want to, because buying each individual romance can add up, financially. If you're looking to save a few dollars and space on your bookshelf. I also wrote in the description in that video, but I didn't hold up the book. This single volume romance Arthurian, the 5 Arthurian romances are all included in this Everyman book. It's in prose. The English translations are in prose, but they're well done, and the translator is D.D.R. Owen, and it's published by Everyman, and it's simply called Arthurian Romances, and it's got all 5 of the romances: the Lancelot, the Yvain or the Knight with the Lion, uh, Percival or the Story of the Grail, uh, and there's a what is that? 3, 4. Um, there's another one, Eric and Enid, uh, and another one. I think it's pronounced Clige, or Clige. But all of them are really good. And like I said, if you want them all in just one edition, uh, you can go with this one. And like I said, I have this book listed in the description in the previous video, which is called Arthurian Legends. And anyway, I ran out of time in the previous video, and I there was one more story I wanted to tell. It's one of my all-time favorite stories, not just with King Arthur or myths in general, but it's just I had to read it. Some of you out there probably had to read this in English literature also, along with Beowulf. It's written originally in Middle English, which is the English that Chaucer used to write his Canterbury Tales. But there are modern English versions. One of the ones I read a couple of them, and my first one was this one, translated by Burton, Raffel, and it's published by Signet Classic. And here it is, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Uh, I'll list this one and one other that I have in the description below. Uh, I also wanted to include another book which I thought you might like. In the previous video, I talked briefly about the story of Gareth. And when I was reviewing the stories for this video, I found this wonderful book that I've had for years. It's a book on castles, illustrated by Alan Lee, and there's a text to it too, and it gives a brief description of the story of Gareth and Lynette, and So I just thought I'd recommend this book because Alan Lee is a wonderful illustrator. You might recognize him as the illustrator to a lot of Tolkien stories, The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and I don't know if this book is still available. So Castles by Alan Lee, written by David Day, designed. Yeah. Anyway, I'll have this in the description below. I don't even know if it's still available, but anyway. Okay, so let me tell you briefly the story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Uh, this is King Arthur pulling the sword out of the stone. I, I, it's made out of some sort of metal, and I bought this uh, around the area of Stonehenge. And when I visited England like many years ago, and anyway, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. What happened is that Sir Gawain was, one of the bravest of King Arthur's knights, and a very decorated warrior. And what happens is that around the time of Christmas, King Arthur was having a big feast in his hall, and what happens is that in walks in this giant, all dressed in green, uh, and from then on, he was called the Green Knight. And what happens is that he talked about, oh, you warriors, King Arthur's court is said to be consist of the greatest warriors. Let's see how brave you guys are. You could chop off my head with this axe today, and then if you promise in a future date to meet me at my chapel in the north, for me to chop your head off in turn. And a lot of King Arthur and his warriors were like, "Oh, this sounds like there's magic afoot. Sounds suspicious." But Gawain was like, "No, no, no, no. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna chop off this guy's head." So he jumps up out of his chair, he grabs the axe, swings it at the giants, and cuts off his head. And the giant very casually picks up his head, and the head starts talking and says, "Okay, in 1 year and a day, you're gonna come up north, and I'm gonna chop your head off." And so so then he left, and the feast went on as usual. Nobody worried about anything. They said, "Oh, it's a year and a day away. Don't think about it." And so, but before you know it, a year and a day went by, and Sir Gawain got ready to travel northwards to find this mysterious green chapel that this giant lived in. And so he's traveling a long way, and in the course of his travels, he comes across this beautiful castle, and it's owned by a baron by the name of Bersalak. Now, Bersalak lives there with his beautiful wife, and they greet Sir Gawain, and they give him hospitality, they give him lodging and food, and Bersalak, and Gawain tells Bersalak his story about how he, last year they were visited by this mysterious stranger, all dressed in green and the color of summer, and it was in the middle of winter. And he challenged us to a bet that if we cut off his heads, one of us, the person who cuts off his head, which was me, has to meet him at the Green Chapel, which is hopefully not far from here, so he can cut off my head. And Bersalak says, "Oh, okay, I know where the Green Chapel is, and I'll take you. I'll show you where it is. But we got a few days left before you have to go there. It's not exactly a year and a day yet, but it will be in a few days. But you got 3 days to stay here. In the meantime, why don't we do a bit of our own? Every day I'm going to go hunting, and I'll give you whatever I kill, and you give me whatever you encounter in my own castle." Well, so the first day goes by. Uh, Bersalak goes out hunting, and he comes back that evening. Before he comes back, Sir Gawain was hanging out in his the apartment that Bersalak gave him to sleep in, to spend the time in. and he hears a knock at the door, and lo and behold, it's Bersalac's wife, and she comes in and she tells Gawain that she desires him, and Gawain, being a chivalrous knight, says, "I'm sorry, but I'm a guest in your husband's house. It would be a great betrayal. As beautiful as you are, it would be a great betrayal to him to take you to bed." So she says, "Okay, in that case, would you at least accept this?" So she gives him a little kiss on the cheek. And that night, Bersalak comes home. He had killed some animals, and he gives it to Gawain, and he says, "Okay, Gawain, what did you find in my castle?" So Gawain does nothing, but he gives Bersalak a kiss on the cheek because his wife gave him a kiss. So that's the only thing he had to offer him. So Bersalak just laughed it off. And then the same thing happened the next day. He got one kiss from the wife, and she still wanted to make love with Gawain, and he still refused her. And so she gave him another kiss, and so he did the same with Bersalak. He gave him a second kiss on the second day. But the third day rolls by, and there was a little bit more of a twist. The wife attempts a third time to make love with Gawain. Gawain again, the third time, refuses it. He goes, "I can't. I'm tied by honor. If circumstances were different, sure, but..." So she says, "Okay, but as a token of my love for you, please accept this." So she gives him a belt made out of green silk, like a girdle, like kind of like a little sash or girdle, and she says it's enchanted, so no harm will come to you if you wear it. Now Gawain is really nervous about meeting the Green Knight, so he accepts the girdle, and she leaves. And that day, Bersalak comes back, and again he gives Gawain the kill that he found that day. Which I think on the third day, it wasn't a very successful day of hunting. He only came back with like a fox, I think, nothing really big. And so he asked Gawain, "Give me what you found today." And Gawain didn't want to give him the girdle, because he thought it might protect him from the Green Knight, from dying at the hands of the Green Knight. Maybe it'll prevent the blade from cutting through his neck. I don't know what he thought, but so anyway, so he then says goodbye to Bersalak, and he goes in the direction where Bersalak told him is the Green Chapel. So Gawain goes walking along, and he doesn't come across any chapel. Instead, he comes across a clearing with some trees, and he hears a voice coming, and it's the Green Knight, and he tells him to, stretch his neck, lie down and stretch his neck out so he could cut off his heads. And the first time Gawain flinches, out of habit. It's not every day you could lie still for somebody to cut off your head. So the Green Knight says, "Oh, you flinched. You can't do that. Take it like a man." So then Gawain lies down again with his neck open and vulnerable. And this time the Green Knight swung his axe, and he purposely missed Gawain. And Gawain is getting annoyed now. He goes, "Okay, I may have flinched, but now you're toying with me. Cut off my head already." So he lays down a third time, and the Green Knight brings the axe down and only gives him a little nick. And then suddenly he starts talking in the voice of Bersalak and says, "Well done, Gawain. The first swing was, I would have missed you anyway, even if you didn't flinch. But that was for not sleeping with my wife. And the second swing that I purposely missed on is for the second night you didn't sleep with my wife and dishonor me. And the third little cut I gave you is because you didn't give me the belt, but I kind of forgive you for that because you were only concerned about preserving your own life, which is understandable, but the important thing is, you did well in this challenge in that you didn't dishonor me by disgracing me, you know, by taking my wife to bed no matter how much she begged you, So this was all sort of a setup, and But Gawain didn't take it well. He felt that he failed the ordeal because he should have given Bersalak the belt, the green belt, silken belt, and so as penance, he kept he as he traveled back to King Arthur's court, he kept the belt hung as a sash, you know, walking along, and then he gets back to King Arthur's court, and everybody's like, "Hey, you're alive! You made it through the ordeal," and he explained what happened, the story about Bersalak and his wife, and how he was the Green Knight in disguise, basically. And all of this was a test to see if I came through, and I think I failed because I didn't give Bersalak the belt because I was too chicken. I was going to lose my life. So forever, as to show my shame, I'm going to wear this green sash forever, and and just to show the camaraderie, is this was like my favorite part of the story. All the knights were like, "Okay, we're all going to wear a green belt from now on," you know, in solidarity with you because we think you did an awesome job. You refused to sleep with his beautiful wife. You only held on to the belt because you were just concerned about your own life, which is understandable. And the Green Knight said himself, and then that you passed, and then we find out that the Green Knight was sent to King Arthur's court by Morgan Le Fay. Morgan Le Fay is the half sister to King Arthur, and she's a constant thorn in his sides because she just doesn't like him and his court. And as to why, maybe there's different reasons. One reason may be that she didn't get along with Guinevere, Arthur's wife. They didn't like each other, and she was hoping that. She's always looking to like disgrace the knights to show that they're not as brave and honorable as they claim they are. And also because she really didn't like Guinevere, she was hoping that the sight of seeing the Green Knight lose his head and then seeing the head like roll off and under the table, and then him picking up and holding up his head and the head is still alive and talking would hopefully give Guinevere a heart attack and die. You know, I forgot what part of the story that's revealed in, but anyway, yeah, that's part of the story. But it didn't work. Guinevere screamed, perhaps, but she didn't die of a heart attack. Yeah, so that's the story briefly of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So if you haven't read it on your own, I really recommend it. It's a great piece of English literature. Here's my little version, and I'll write this version down, and I have like one other, you know. And okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this story, and I hope to see you again when I do another upload.